Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the interview segment where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. This week, we're talking to author Simon Toyne about his new book, The Searcher. So, hello, Simon. Hello all the way from England, I believe.
Indeed, Jason. Hello. Hello, America. This is England calling.
And I've learned that it's actually like 2 o'clock in the morning where you are, and I am profoundly sorry, but I'm very happy that you were willing to forgo whatever beauty rest you require.
Well, if you'd seen me, you realise obviously I've spent a lifetime of foregoing beauty rest, but also we're like a nation of vampires over here. We never sleep. We just sort of bumble around through the night, doing stuff, drinking tea, that kind of stuff, in the fog. Wearing top hats. That's us. That's Britain.
Yes. No, that is what I've heard. That's completely my vision of writers.
Yeah, it's all true. It's all true.
Like a British version of Joseph Cotton in what was that? The Third Man, right? Where he's just
the Third Man. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That was Vienna, but that's Europe. Okay, it's just generally Europe, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
That was everybody's complaint always about the Hammer movies, is that Europe and England are just sort of one large place that you can kind of ride a coach from, one to the other and back again.
But when I first came to America, I think people said, "Oh, like you're from London, and so it's like foggy all the time, right?" And I was like, "No, it's not. It's like hardly foggy at all. Since the Clean Air Act of 19 whatever." And I think it all came from those horror movies, those early horror movies. I think a lot of people's kind of, in the same way as I think British people look at America and imagine it to be sort of cars with big lots of chrome and all that sort of stuff. It's it's the cultural references that sort of drip into you, certainly when you're younger, that make you think that's exactly what it should be like.
I think it's impossible to escape those things. I mean, in fact, is that true? That's something we all learned from Mad Men last year. Was London fog raincoats, but there's no real London fog. That was just basically smoke and smog from before the Clean Air Act. But I never
exactly.
So that's really true. Okay. Well, wow. So Jared Harris,
I can confirm. I'm here to help Scotch and confirm any rumours related to my country. Maybe that's what this could be. This could turn into sort of a big kind of public information film about England today.
Well, since your book takes place primarily in Arizona, I endeavor to do the same thing about the American Southwest. So no worries. All right, let me give you your bio so that people know. Simon Toyne worked in British television for 20 years. As a writer, director, and producer, he's worked on several award-winning shows, one of which won a BAFTA. His books have been translated into, this is amazing, 27 languages in more than 50 countries. He lives in England with his wife and family. And the new book that we're talking about today is The Searcher. And it just came out literally this month. It is a Halloween baby. It came out in October, The Searcher by Simon Toyne. So welcome, and we've already started talking, and it's delightful. So this is a complicated book, but would it be too remiss for me to ask you to sum up in an elevator pitch, what is The Searcher about? Or I can take a shot at it, but I'd really rather you did it.
It's all writers hate doing the elevator pitch. You're sort of cramming 500 pages into like a kind of pithy little one-liner. But I mean, basically, it's about. I mean, if it's about something, it's about identity. I mean, it starts off with a guy walking away from a crashed plane in the Arizona desert. He's got no shoes on his feet. He's wearing a very elegant jacket. He can't remember if he was on the plane. He can't remember anything about himself. But if he looks around at the flora and fauna, he seems to know everything about it. He knows the Latin names. He knows what the Hohokam Indians called it. He knows the medicinal properties. And up ahead of him, he sees a town. And all he knows for sure, he has this absolute conviction that there's someone in that town that he's there to save, but he can't remember why. And as he carries on walking towards the town, the kind of police, the emergency services arrive, the town sheriff and the fire trucks.
Because the plane
and they... Because the plane is distressed, exactly. Yeah, he's walking away from this crash plane, although he can't remember being on it or if he was on it. But he hasn't got a scratch on him. But you would assume that he was on it. And the sheriff asks him if he's all right, and he says, "Oh, do you know this this guy James Coronado, which is his name he's got in his head?" And the sheriff says, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "Oh, well, I think I'm here to save him." And the sheriff says, "Well, we buried him this morning." And that's that's how it starts. So basically, that's the kickoff, and he has to kind of figure out what happened to this guy, but ultimately, how do you save a man who is already dead?
Yes, and this is this has been said to be very similar to thrillers like you'd read from like Lee Child or Stephen King. Lots of characters going back and forth, multiple viewpoints. As and it's very, and is thriller the way you would put it? Is that firmly the genre that you put this into?
Definitely, yeah. It's my fourth book, and I definitely would consider me, if I had to kind of slap a label on myself, I'd say I'm a thriller writer. But I read widely. I read horror, I read literary stuff, I read kind of the classics. I read also, and I think all of that bleeds into it. When I sit down and write a thriller, I don't go, right, it's got to have, I don't have a list of rules and go, oh, it's got to be this, otherwise it doesn't count. There's definitely some sort of genre blurring in this one in particular. There's a sort of a very light supernatural kind of thing, although you're thinking, is it, as the reader, it's like, is it supernatural, or is it this guy, the central character, Solomon Creed? He's so odd that you're sort of thinking, is he just imagining it, or all these things he's imagining, he's seeing, it's difficult to tell whether they're real or not. And the place
all these secrets begin to sort of bleed their way out of him as you follow him. You realize that he knows things like how to defend himself if somebody attacks him, or how hot jet fuel burns, or just crazy things that he's aware of, even though he has no memory. Okay,
right,
so
exactly.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's one of those things. It's like he can only find out what he knows by exposing himself to situations. It's like at one point he needs to get away, and the only way is a horse, but he has no idea if he can ride a horse. He certainly has no idea if he can ride one bareback, which is his only option, other than to climb on board a horse and see what happens. And so it sort of puts him in a very kind of unique situation for a thriller hero, because normally a thriller hero knows exactly what they can do. They might be in a situation where they need to figure stuff out or save someone or whatever, but they know what their skills are. They know what their skill set is. My main character has no idea what his skill set is. He has no center. In fact, that's the central mystery of the whole thing. Isn't like a relic or some kind of conspiracy that's going on. The central mystery really is him. Is the main character. I mean, there's lots of other mysteries that go around it as well. But in unraveling the mystery of this town, he also starts to unravel the mystery of himself.
Very, very cool. Do you think a lot about other examples? Like, if you're writing and you've got a publisher who's waiting on this book, are you thinking, I'm going to make this feel like a reader of Lee Child would enjoy this, or a reader of Stephen King, or does that even enter into your consciousness when you're composing the book?
No, I mean that's something that kind of marketers do to sort of, and I understand it, to tell initially bookstores and also reviewers and everything what type of book it is, and inevitably if it's sort of similar to something, like if I'd written a legal thriller, then inevitably they'll compare it to John Grisham. You go to
right. My
first three books had a very strong sort of religious conspiracy theory kind of element, and so inevitably I was the English Dan Brown immediately.
The English Dan Brown, I love it.
The English Dan Brown, but I would point out I don't own any kind of tweed jackets or black polo necks or all the kind of stuff that he wears. It's like I'm taller than him, I sound different, whatever. Anyway, but no, I understand it as a marketing thing, because you've got to give. I'm a new author, and most people won't have read me before or recognize my name, and so you need to have some steers. And one is the cover. You do a cover that very much kind of speaks to a certain audience.
Yes.
The cover of The Searcher is a figure running down a very straight, empty road through a very dramatic-looking desert scape. and also you compare it to other authors. So no, I certainly don't sit down and go, right, I'm going to do a Lee Child book, or I'm going to do a Stephen King book or anything. I mean, I wouldn't dare as much as anything. But no, I mean, I think like most writers, I started, I've read all these guys, and I think I start off from a point of just wanting to write a book that I want to read and tell a story that I think hasn't been told, or certainly hasn't been told in the way I want to tell it. That's my starting point, really, not a kind of I'm going to do a mashup between loads of people. I mean, inevitably, because I read all those kind of things, it will bleed in, all that sort of stuff, all of those influences come in. You can't help it. You always end up stealing either consciously or unconsciously. But you just try and steal from the best.
We were talking earlier about how James Herbert, the English writer, had done a book called Survivor that this book reminded me of. And that one was also about a plane crash and a bunch of people orienting themselves around a mystery and amnesia and stuff. And I don't know if you ever read The Survivor, but to me, I think you have to keep reading so that you can find read all this old stuff, and it gets sort of mashed up in your unconscious and comes out in your new art. So
I agree. It's fuel, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This book is like 500. Okay, this is a geeky question. How long is this book? I mean, like in words. Like, what would you call this? 120?
It's 100 and just slightly north of 122,000 words.
I mean, so when you're writing, because I know that our listeners are very interested in process, and I'm a geek about process because I love how.
Oh, me too. Oh, I got to a process until the sun came up here.
All right, so you've got a book to write, like you're writing this book, and on a typical day in the middle of writing that book, where do you do your writing? Where are you going to be?
I like working in noisy places. I'm a full-time writer, so I haven't got a day job or anything. Well, this is my day job. Sometimes my night job, as it turns out. And I used to work in television, as you said in your intro. And TV is like, very noisy. There's lots of people, there's lots of opinions, there's constant meetings, there's constant energy. You're always up against deadline, and I miss that. So I tend to work in a cafe. I've got 3 kids, and I tend to use them as a timing device. So I'll sort of go and drop them off at school, and then go and sit in a cafe around the corner and work there all day. I know the people who own the cafe, and I've got to know quite a few other sort of people like me who work, from home or whatever. And I like that. I kind of like the noise. I like the kind of crunch of the coffee and the steam going and the energy. I like the fact, because if I'm on my own at home in silence, I find silence oppressive, and I can't do it. I can't work. I find it really distracting. So I have to kind of be around people. So that's where I generally work.
These are like your coworkers at this cafe. Then you're seeing the same folks every day. You're handing one another pens and plugging in one another's laptops and stuff like that.
Exactly, and there's a little section. It's weird. There's a little section in this cafe that we all gravitate towards, and I don't know why, but we just do. And like over a period of a few weeks, you start off and you sort of nod because you recognize them. It's like the commuters on the train or whatever. You sort of nod at these people because you recognize them, they recognize you. Then after a while, it's sort of a, hey, how are you? What are you doing exactly? And like there's one guy who works there who's the leading cryptic crossword setter in the UK. So he sets all the crosswords for the big broadsheet newspapers. And initially, when I went in, I thought he was just doing the crossword. I thought, this guy comes in every morning and just sits there doing the crossword. Turns out he's actually setting the crossword. And there's another guy who comes in who's a comedian, quite a famous comedian over here, who's also one of the dads at school as well, so I kind of knew him through that as well. And we have this kind of little ritual where we'll sort of, we'll sit and we'll stake our claim, stake our favourite desks, and then we'll sit there and have coffee and chat. And it's just like work. It's like coming into work. It's like morning, how's whatever, and have a little chat for about 20 minutes. And because we all do such weird things, we talk about incredibly broad and esoteric and eclectic stuff. And then we'll finish our coffee and then, sit down and get on with work. And I often just put earphones on just to sort of tune out for a bit, just to kind of get myself into the writing and play some music, often soundtrack music to set a mood.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is actually...
Depends what I'm writing.
Yeah. Okay. You mean
if I'm writing action, I'll write. I soundtrack music a lot. So I mean, like the Bourne Supremacy soundtrack is really good for action. It's just really good. You just put that on. The good thing as well about soundtrack music is generally they're about sort of 45 minutes long. Soundtrack, something like that, which is a good amount, which is a perfect amount of time to focus. There've been all kinds of studies done about, sort of the maximum amount of time you can really focus before your brain needs a rest, and it generally is 45 minutes. So if you can sit down and focus for 45 minutes, which is the length of a soundtrack, then and when it finishes, it's like time for a break, time for a screen break, time to go and get a cup of coffee, have a little walk around, chat to Mr. Crossword Man or whoever. It's quite good. I sort of, I have a sort of weirdly, loosely regimented day in that, I have to do work, or most of my work, generally, but in the hours when my children are at school, because then I go and pick them up after, and it's broken up into sort of 45-minute sections.
Do you try to hit a certain number of words per day when you're on a deadline, when somebody's expecting something?
I do, yeah. It depends I do outline as well. So when I'm outlining, words per day doesn't really work because you can cut and paste a kind of a Wikipedia entry and you've got your 1,000 words if it's relevant. So that doesn't really count. But when I've got my outline and I'm writing to deadline, it's a really easy sum. Basically, you look at the date of your deadline, you look at the current date, you count the days between, and you divide the contractual length of your novel, which in my case is 110,000 words, by those days, and that's how many you have to do per day. But I always write long as well. I write long. I mean, my first drafts are always a good sort of 25% longer than they need to be. And then I do a really kind of brutal second draft, which I think comes from my TV days. I'm used to sort of basically assembling a kind of rough cut and then finessing it. And I do that with writing as well.
Well, what sort of TV? I understand completely what you said about removing, you're going at the draft and you're slicing things out. But what kind of projects were you doing this on television?
Well, I never did scripted drama, so I didn't do, sort of like actors and stuff like that. I did, a tiny bit, but not much. But mostly I did sort of features stuff, which is formatted things. So things like, I did documentaries, and documentaries you always start off big and kind of work your way down to what the story is. I did all sorts of stuff. I did travel programs, I did comedy, I did kind of list programs. Lots of makeover shows, tons of stuff, lots and lots of a lot of lifestyle stuff, and those kind of things. You always, you work out your structure, and then you sort of film far more than you need, and then you gradually work it down. And documentaries even more, you sort of, because you're not quite sure when you're doing a documentary, you're not quite sure what you're going to get, so you film a lot. And then see what you've got, and then work out the story from that. So that's my process, is sort of amassing lots of stuff and then kind of being brutal and just removing everything that's not the story.
I like that word, brutal, and sometimes that can be very freeing when you say, I've got this draft here, and this draft needs to lose 20%, and that means it needs to lose 60 pages. And so that means we're going to start just slashing through stuff. And once we're done, maybe we put some stuff back, but now we're going to get brutal. And it can be very freeing because you can just go, you know what, I don't care. This, and there's all kinds of, there are cliches people throw at you, like kill your darlings and all this stuff. And I don't know where I sit on that, but it can be very nice to just go, this needs to cut. We need to cut for time.
My maxim is that nothing. Everything comes second to the story. It's like you are telling a story, and even if you've got this brilliant descriptive passage and the writing is eloquent and the language is almost poetic, if it gets in the way, if it's not telling the story, then it can't be there. The whole killing your darlings thing is. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say the killing your darlings thing. I think it's a romantic notion, but they're not really your darlings. If they're not helping you tell the story, they're not your darlings at all. They're sort of those kind of writerly flourishes that you sort of, when you're in the midst of writing your first draft, you're very taken by them. Also, it's that thing I discovered as well that I think sometimes the stuff that you really work at in a first draft, the stuff that's difficult, the stuff that you're thinking, I really need to nail this scene, and you really work at it. Often the reason it's difficult is because it's not needed, or it's not needed in the form you think. So the reason you've really struggled is because actually deep down you know that you don't need it. And the stuff that flows, lightly off the pen as if like you're just channeling it is the stuff that stays. The stuff that absolutely you just knew was this was the way it had to be, and it had to be from this person's point of view, and this is the information that you've come across. That stuff that you just put down almost kind of, first time. Often, I found you often almost don't tinker with that. That stuff stays. You might finesse it a little bit, but actually it's it's kind of arrives kind of fully formed. And the stuff that you really have to chisel away at, the stuff you really have to work at, is often the stuff that you come to a second draft and go, oh man, I spent a week working on this scene and I don't even need it, and then it goes. But that's what I mean by being brutal as well.
No, and I think that's very wise, and it's so hard. It's very, very difficult, and I know I think the more experience you get, the easier that gets. But nevertheless, I don't think it ever gets completely easy to recognize the difference. Sometimes. So you're trying to do, you don't even know how many words per day you're going to do. Instead, it's all based on necessity, like between now and when it's due. And you're working at a coffee shop, which I find hilarious. Did you do this, like back when I was in college, I remember the only thing we ever did for fun, and I think that's because I just hung out with a bunch of complete nerds, is that we would just get our laptops and we'd go out to a cafe and write together, and at the end of the evening, we'd sort of throw our laptops at one another and kind of like check in on what we're done. Do you have any writers that you share what you're working on with?
I have my wife reads it. I tend to kind of show it to her in chunks. And we're still married, so that works. What's that?
I said, I'm just astonished that you're. I mean, I have a wife, and I don't think she's read a single one of. And I mean no disrespect when I say this, if she ever listens, but I don't think she's ever read one of my books. I mean, ever.
Really?
I've published 9 books. I don't think she's read. I don't think so.
Not even just out of interest, not even just to sort of just see what you've been doing in your office all that time, just to kind of like, not even just to check, to see that, make sure, it's not all, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I see, if I was her, I'd be reading that just to check that out, just to make sure you're not going insane and about to attack her with an axe.
Well, you raise a really valid point, because I often go, hey, I'm going to the University of Denver, I'll be back at around midnight, and, and spend the evening out at the library. You're right. No, it's true. It would be a totally excellent excuse for doing anything but what I'm actually.
You could do whatever you wanted. If she's not checking up, if she's not reading those things, you could just self-publish. You could self-publish anything, and just go, no, look, there they are on Amazon. There's a new one. Look, new title, new cover. Just have to come up with a cover. How hard's that? There you go. You could be doing anything. In fact, that's quite a good. That's like a good basis for a story, right there. Is the guy who's married to the writer. Who turns out not to be a writer after all. He's off doing all kinds of things. There you go. No. So we've gone on a weird ellipse here, but no. My wife reads. My wife's really well read. She reads more than me, but she doesn't read thrillers so much. I mean, she does a bit, but no. And so I let her read it, and I just know. She's got one of two reactions to anything, really. One is she'll read it and then go, oh, it's good. That's it. And I'll go, oh, it's fine. Or she'll go, yeah, with that kind of strange little note. Yeah, the sort of up and down note in a voice. And when she says that, I know I'm in trouble, because there'll be something coming. And often she'll say something, and I'll kind of get all cross and go, no, you're missing the point, and get all defensive. And then I'll go away and think about it and think actually, no, she's right. And then I'll look at it. My agent reads stuff as well, and she's really good. My agent is very good. They're very hands-on. Some agents just do the deal and then disappear and kind of, sort of hound you when you're late on a deadline. But mine are very hands-on, editorial. I've also got some writer friends that I'll run things by. For this one, because it's set in Arizona, and as you can tell, I am not from Arizona. I ran it. Yeah, I know I haven't got the Arizona accent, but I ran it by sort of a couple of writer friends of mine, American writer friends. Just to sort of, with an American ear to, not so much for story, but as much, just to make sure there was no Englishness creeping into it, just because there's a vast difference in our languages. When my books come out in America,
actually. I mean,
because it's like we were talking about earlier about the fog and all that kind of stuff, and it's like there's my version of American might not be. I mean, I've been to America quite a lot of times, and I know a lot of Americans, and I read a lot of American fiction and watch obviously lots of American films and TV and stuff. So it's one of those things that I'm culturally familiar with, but being familiar with it and writing it is something different, and I wanted it. You always striving for, veracity in work. So I ran it through some American friends, and they sort of made some changes or suggestions, just kind of cultural references and things, or little turns of phrase, and that was really useful.
Well, that's one of the. I mean, you seem to have gone to town with this. One thing that happens recurring throughout this novel are excerpts from a history of this particular town in Arizona that a lot of the action takes place in Redemption. And it's very historic, it's dealing with the founding of the town and of dealing with Indians and just all this stuff. And it has that, use the word veracity, it has that feeling of somebody who's very familiar with it. So well done. I mean, it's an excellent, if it's an illusion, it's a good illusion. And I suppose that's all that matters.
As long as it seems real, then it is real, isn't it? Really, in fiction. But weirdly, those old bits, the sort of the memoir of the founding father, and this place was kind of founded in 1880, sort of when Arizona was sort of heading to statehood, and or not yet a state, still a territory, and in those kind of early days. Those bits were easier because, in actual fact, those people who were the Europeans who were pouring into Arizona then were Europeans, as I said, because a lot of them were kind of, fleeing Europe in various guises, whether it was the escaping from the potato famines and all that kind of stuff in sort of 1848 and all those kind of, and so actually writing that was easier because it's a kind of more of an English Victorian, quite formal language.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and so weirdly that was kind of closer. Like I was kind of more comfortable with writing the 1880 stuff than I was the modern stuff, just because, who knew how they spoke in 1880? Your guess is as good as mine. You can have an
one of my favorite
guess,
books. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No, go on.
Well, I was just thinking The Searchers, and I completely forgot for a moment that this book's American title is The Searcher, but The Searchers by Alan LeMay, it covers a lot of that same ground of European immigrants who are founding Texas around the period you're talking about. And
exactly.
They have this patois of Norwegian, English, and just all this, stuff, making this oddball version of English that these frontiersmen, are speaking. But you're right, when it comes to writing, and certainly if you go back and look at the writing from the time, it all sounds very, very sort of Victorian, very, very Dickensian in a way. I love reading that stuff. By the way, American work from that period, it's so foreign to the way English would wind up sounding around here. Wow. Okay, I got one more thing to ask you about, and then I should totally let you go to bed. And that is this book, The Searcher, this big honking doorstop of a novel that I'm holding in my hand, has been optioned for the movies by I think Appian, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's very exciting. So Appian is Leonardo DiCaprio's company. It's been optioned. Appian are brilliant at literary adaptations. They've done Shutter Island. They did Wolf on Wall Street. I mean, they're really good at doing good jobs. of turning books into movies. But what they're doing, as everyone is at the moment, is moving into long-form TV drama. So drama serials, and so they've optioned this to turn into a TV series, which is great, which is very exciting, obviously. And it's
so that would mean like what? Like a mini-series kind of thing? Or,
like a mini-series, yeah. So like 10 1 hours or 13 1 hours or whatever. So yeah, that's that. Which of course, I mean, the thing about a movie is it's 2 hours long or thereabouts. And a book, if you read it, if you get an audio book, my audio book, I think, runs to something like 9 hours of someone just reading the book. So there's a disparity there. So inevitably, if you turn it into a movie, then generally you have to hang it on a star. So it's all about the main character, and all the subsidiary characters get cut, and all the side plots get cut, and it all becomes a very kind of linear narrative. Whereas a TV series, you can keep all that stuff. You're telling the story in 10 hours or 13 hours or whatever it is. And so you kind of keep the same structure and the same richness and all the different layers of a novel. I mean, I think it's the closest to the novel form, I think, the long-form TV drama in a visual medium. So I think it suits it because, as you said in the intro, it's not, I mean, it is about, it does have a main character, this kind of enigmatic amnesiac figure called Solomon Creed, but it's got all these other characters as well. It's told in third person, so you jump around from different point of views, different characters. So it's very kind of filmic in that respect. Anyway, you get.
It has a movie feel. I mean, you can totally see that. There's no doubt about it. And I think that probably was the really clever thing when you were writing this, is that you pick it up and you read it and you feel like you are, it's very approachable language, and the setting feels movie-like. Or feature-like, I should say, and so that fits with this new television that we're experiencing right now. These sort of long, sprawling, not since Shogun. Very recently now, we've got these big, like, I don't know. This is the new golden age of television with these lines.
Absolutely, I think there's no doubt, and also I think it's coincide with two things. One is the proliferation and the speed of the internet, which means people can watch things on demand whenever they like, and they have like with books, they have access to whole libraries of stuff instantly, and so they can binge watch stuff, and which effectively is like reading a novel. Binge watching a TV series is like sitting down and reading a novel. It's exactly the same process. And the other thing is the studio system. Movies have moved more towards spectacle. So they're all $200 million plus special effects extravaganzas. Sort of the Marvel comics franchises, the superhero franchises, the big sequels or the big remakes. There isn't room really in the studio system, in the movie system, to make those films that you used to get in the kind of 70s and the 80s. Those sort of small, more thoughtful, more novelistic, I suppose, stories. So all of the people who would have done that in the studio system have now moved to television because that's where all that's happening. So there's an enormous...
wouldn't you rather? I mean, if somebody's going to tell if somebody's going to tell your story in 10 hours or 13 hours instead of 90 minutes, I mean, to me, it's totally... And like I say, it's so weird that we're back to this because, when I was a kid, I remember things like I said, like Shogun and Centennial and these big, crazy miniseries that would cover these gigantic books that James Michener was pounding out at the time. So you're going to be the Michener. You're going to be the... Oh, see?
I'm the new Michener. That's what I'm going for.
You're not
Although
my books
aren't as big as his. My books aren't nowhere near as big as his. You sort of you're putting people off. People are going, oh my God, I'm reading that. I'll break my wrist. No, it's not. I'm not as big. I'm not as big as Michener. I'm like Michener light in terms of, I think the search is just shy of about 500 pages, something like that.
You're absolutely right. And Centennial, you're right. Those were like 800, 900 pages long.
Those were like 1,000 pages long or something. I remember, and the Shogun was as well. James Clavell's Shogun is another one. It's like you could kill someone with that book. If you hit them with that book, they're not getting up. Whereas mild contusion with my book, really, you'd get up and fight another day.
Michener would tell people that they were free to. This blows my mind. because you'd be reading something like Centennial, which I started reading recently, and interested in the history of Colorado, where I live. And the first couple chapters are literally about the survival of a prehistoric platypus-like creature that is building a dam. And somebody said, what the hell is going on in these books? And he goes, you can skip most of that stuff.
He always says that, though. Have you read Hawaii? Hawaii literally starts off with the formation of Hawaii, like with this volcanic eruption. I mean, that's just like talk about backstory. It's like, okay, where's this set? Hawaii, okay. Yeah, but what's Hawaii's backstory? Let's put that in. No, it's
amazing. Your main
character
is lava at that point.
Yeah, it's like your main character appears to be magma. Is he like a superhero? No, I know, it's weird. I mean, the thing is, I could just only imagine trying to get away with that stuff these days. My editor would be going, okay, so we don't meet it starts off with lava, and you don't meet the main character until page 180. And I'm like, come on. I'll just tell people they can skip that.
By the way. You start your book with your main character running down the road in first person, and I've even heard, tell me if you've heard this, I've heard that sort of thing, if not in this draft, would have been demanded because people choose whether to read a book on Kindle, especially because they get the first couple of chapters free, and so it's very useful to have the main character in the opening pages, so people know like right away who the main character is. Have you heard that? For
sure. Yeah, no, definitely. I feel it in the edit notes as well. With my first book, Sanctus, which is the first book of the trilogy, the Sanctus trilogy, in my first draft, I didn't introduce my main character till like about page 100. There's this whole kind of thing that goes on, so it's like a really slow intro to this character, and then they gradually get pulled into it. And I deliberately wanted to do that. I wanted to sort of start off.
Sure.
It was my first book. What did I know? And I was like, this is great. I haven't read this for ages. It's like you do this thing and you don't know who to follow, and then slowly, then all of a sudden this person gets pulled in. And of course, as soon as I showed it, I finally, when I got an agent, she was reading it and going, we need to meet the main character by like page 10 at the latest. And I was like, but no, it's that you've missed it, the whole thing. It's like, this is the thing, that she doesn't come into page 100. And she was like,
that's very interesting.
It's like, no, we need to bring her in like, chapter 4, by the chapter 3 minimum. I was like, okay, fine.
No, but it's true. So I'm glad to have heard that was true. All right, I should let you go, and also we have to clear out and record something else. But my gosh, I feel like I could probably ask you stuff about this and about your process and everything, all night. But I really appreciate you taking the time out. And the book is called The Searcher by Simon Toyne. It is brand new from HarperCollins. It's gorgeous, and it's getting really good reviews, and it's been picked up by Appian Way, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's group. So I urge you guys to check it out. Simon, thank you so much for talking and spending time with us. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and we should do this again sometime.
Absolutely. All right, don't be a stranger. Thank you, and I will make sure and send you the interview as soon as it's up. Ciao.